I'm George Simons, co-founder of SoloSuit, and today I'm going to show you how to make a debt validation letter to fight back against debt collectors. First thing you need to know is that you only have 30 days to respond to the debt collector. And this is laid out in 15 United States Code 1692G, Section 809, which is basically the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, Section 809. And that lays out that you have a 30-day limit to respond to a debt collector to request that they provide validation of your debt. The best way to fight back against debt collectors is by sending them a debt validation letter. It's real simple. There's just two steps. Step 1, write the letter. Step 2, mail the letter to the collector. In this video, we're going to go over both of those steps. I'm also going to answer a lot of questions that people oftentimes have about debt validation letters. And I'm going to give you all the info that you need to get this debt collector off your back. And as we're getting into this, I just want you to know that SoloSuit can actually do all of this for you. At this point in the video, a lot of people just go over to solosuit.com and they use our website to generate their own debt validation letter. It's a personalized letter. It's like the best letter that you can possibly get to validate a debt from a debt collector. A lot of people use it and it is awesome. You can just go over to solosuit.com and we'll take care of it. We'll get it done for you. And also, our customers love us and I love our customers. We got a great review from our friend Daniel recently. He said, "You'd be silly not to drop a few bucks and possibly save yourself thousands in the process. I can't thank y'all enough for making an overwhelming situation something handleable." There we go, Daniel. I'm glad we could help you out, and I hope you win your case. Step 1, write the letter. Alright, so I'm going to tell you in this step how you actually write a debt validation letter. As we're getting into this, I think it's essential for you to know what is a debt validation letter, right? What it actually is. So I'm going to kind of lay out the basics here in case you don't already know. The FDCPA says the debt collector needs to include 5 points in its communication with you within 5 days of its first contact with you. So that's 5 points within 5 days. Alright, 5 points, 5 days. So what are those points that it needs to include in its communication with you? Number 1, it needs to say the amount of the debt. Number 2, it needs to say the name of the creditor. Those are pretty simple things. Number 3, it needs to say that the collector will assume the debt is valid unless the consumer sends them a debt validation letter within 30 days. Number 4, if you send the collector a debt validation letter, they will need to mail you validation of the debt. And the collector needs to include a statement of that in its correspondence with you. The 5th thing it needs to include is a statement saying if you send them a debt validation letter, they will need to mail you the name and the address of the original creditor. So those are the 5 things that the collector needs to include within 5 days of its first contact with you. You might say, hey, my collector just called me, he didn't include those 5 things. Well, I got good news for you. You can actually sue that collector for $1,000. So you could be making money. Instead of giving them money, you could be getting money. Now there we go, that's a turn of the tide. So that's what the debt collector needs to do within 5 days of its first contact with you for attempting to collect the debt. After that, you then have 30 days to send them a debt validation letter asserting a bunch of stuff. Right? A bunch of stuff can be included in the debt validation letter, but you have 30 days to send it to the collector. And here's what the FDCPA says about a debt validation letter. If the consumer notifies the debt collector in writing within the 30-day period that the debt or any portion thereof is disputed, the debt collector shall cease collection of the debt until the debt collector obtains verification of the debt and a copy of such verification is mailed to the consumer by the debt collector. Alright, so that's some that's some statutory law right there. Okay, that's the real deal, that's the real stuff. What that is saying is that you can send the collector the debt validation letter, and then until they actually provide validation, until they show proof that you owe the debt, they can't contact you anymore, they also can't collect the debt. It's a very powerful letter in practically every situation where a debt collector is coming after a consumer for a debt. So just one more time, just to be real clear, here's how it works, right? So a debt collector sends somebody a letter or they give them a phone call trying to collect on a debt. And then within 5 days, the collector needs to include these 5 points of information in a correspondence with the consumer. Okay? And then within 30 days, the consumer can send a debt validation letter requesting that the collector prove that the person actually owes the debt. And if the collector doesn't do that, then they can't collect on the debt. There you go. And that's why it's so important. Here's how you actually write the letter. Start with info for both parties. Right? This is like what your name is, what your address is, the name and address for the debt collector as well. You can address the collector however you want. Right? You don't have to start off to whom it may concern, : all right? It doesn't matter what your teacher told you back in grade school. You can start the letter however the freak you want to start the letter, all right? You can even start off by saying, "What's up?" What's up? Right? You can say whatever you want on that letter. Or you can start off by saying like, "Hey, screw you, debt collector. Provide me this verification of the debt." You can do that if you want. Might not have a great result, but it might. You might be like, "Hey man, this guy's crazy. We gotta get out of here. Let's leave him alone." Who knows? Next, lay out the basics in the letter. Specify how you were contacted. Did they contact you by phone or by mail, possibly by email, possibly in person? How were you contacted? And then provide info to help the debt collector identify the debt. So in order for this letter to be meaningful for the collector needs to be able to know what debt you're talking about. Usually collectors are attempting to collect on a bazillion debts all at once. So they need some info they need your name, the address, probably an account number. You don't want to give them too much information. You don't want to provide them with new info, but you should include information that was included in the letter that they sent you. So most collection agencies have a file number for the account, and they'll give your whole matter its own file number inside the collection agency. So you definitely want to include that. They might include an account number for the credit card account, something along those lines. That's probably will be sufficient for them to identify what you're talking about. Also, you want to include how much the debt was. All right, here's the big thing you definitely want to do. State that you dispute the debt. Stating that you dispute the debt, that's what kind of blocks the collector from coming after you and continuing to call you until they actually provide validation of the debt. And then we get into the bulk of the letter, where you make your requests. All right, the debt validation letter is a form of legal demand letter, which is basically a letter where you tell somebody else to either do something or stop doing something. In this section of the letter, you kind of are doing both, right? So here's some main points that you can make. You might not want to make all of them in your letter. Maybe you do. Usually doesn't hurt. So you could say, "Don't contact me except to validate the debt. Report to the credit bureaus that the debt is disputed." That's a big one, because if these guys are coming after you, they probably already have put the debt on your credit report. That's a ding in your credit, and you might not even owe the debt. So you can tell them, "Hey, you got to report that to the credit bureaus." Then you can request that they provide all of this, a bunch of information to verify the debt. All right. Whether or not they actually need to provide this information, it's a little bit of a question that's unresolved in courts. But you can certainly ask for it, and maybe they will provide all this info. So you can request that they give proof that you owe the debt, give the exact amount and accounting of the debt, like how much of this is the original principal, how much of it is interest, how much of it is bogus fees that you're adding on top of this, how much of this debt is actually just fraudulent that you're just making up. The age of the debt, how old is it, the debt collector's ownership of the debt. You can ask them, "Hey, do you actually own this, or are you just trying to collect on debts that you don't owe?" Because people actually do that all the time. You can ask them to provide their debt collector license and their right, or whatever gives them the right to collect the debt in your state. It's especially important in New York, where only licensed debt collectors can come after you. You can request a calculation of whether the statute of limitations has expired on the debt, and you can watch other videos to find out more about the statute of limitations. And you can request that they tell you info about the last action taken on the account. That's important for calculating the statute of limitations. They have to tell you when was the last time that somebody made a payment on the debt. If that time was before the statute of limitations, then the statute of limitations has probably expired, and you might be getting off the hook. Oh, I'm free. Here's another good point you can make. You can say, "If you validate the debt, then cease contacting me for any other reason other than to tell me that you're suing." All right, that's one of my favorite ones, honestly. So it's like a cease and desist clause that's covered early on in the sections of the FDCPA, where even if they do validate the debt, you can still send them a cease and desist. Okay, it's a pretty good move. People use that pretty good, right? Where you play that card, and then maybe they do sue you. If the debt isn't a very large value, they probably just drop it and forget about it. But if they do sue you, then you can just go over to solo suit, and you can use their answer document to respond to the lawsuit and then win your case. So that's a pretty good move. And then here we go. Finally, last point that you probably want to put into your debt validation letter is you can close by threatening legal action. That's one of my favorites, right? Americans are litigious for good reason, because that's how we make people play fair in America. You can say, hey, debt collector, if you don't do this stuff, I'm going to sue you. Okay, if you keep on contacting me, I'm going to sue you for harassment. Also, if you don't provide validation of the debt, that's a violation of the FDCPA. So I'm going to sue you for $1,000 for that. And then if you didn't provide validation within the 5 days, I'm going to sue you for that too. You could be just making all kinds of money. But in a lot of cases, you want to threaten legal action, because that lets them know that you're serious. And then of course, you want to close the letter with your signature, and that's pretty much all you need. Alright, so that's how you write the debt validation letter. Step 2, mail the letter. Step 2 is simple, but complicated. It seems pretty simple, mailing the letter. I did that. I had a pen pal in the 4th grade. I mailed stuff. How hard is it, right? Well, this is like legal documents, so a lot more is on the line. You want to make sure you don't mess up, right? So first, in order to mail it, you gotta have a printer. Right, you gotta have a printer that works and has toner and ink and all that stuff's ready to go, right? Or you gotta have access to it. Maybe your friend has a printer, maybe the library has a printer. But you gotta get these documents printed. Then you have to know how to use the post office. The post office is a pretty crazy place. Honestly, whenever I go to the post office and I'm in line, I'm always like freaking out. I'm like, man, feels like the world's ending. Feels like dystopia in here, just a little bit. Never a pleasant experience at the post office. A little pro tip here on mailing out the document. We've found that the best way to mail the document is actually to use priority mail. A lot of people say use certified mail, like request the return receipt, signature request, all that jazz. We find the best way to do it is this priority mail. You can get the tracking number with priority mail. It stands up in court. It shows proof that it was delivered, just like anything else, right? You don't have to pay the extra like $5 or whatever for the return receipt. Certified mail, honestly, is just like a disaster, right? You go to like post office, unless you literally have all day to spare to wait for the post office attendant to be like, like on the certified mail receipt, and then like they are handwriting on the certified mail label, and then they like mess up and they have to start over on the new label, and then by the time you know it's like 5 p.m.
29 THD03.
29
THD03.
It's a rough time. That's why we just do priority mail oftentimes. But honestly, we can mail documents for you at Solo Suits, and we can take care of all this stuff for you. Alright, so that's step 2, right? And you want to make sure that you send that out within the 30-day period of when that collector first made contact with you or gave you the first 5-point letter. Alright, now that we're at this point in the video, again, I just want to let you know, Solo Suit has an awesome debt validation letter. We can actually just generate it for you. Just go over to our website, answer about like six questions or so. It takes literally like 3 minutes, and we'll generate the debt validation letter for you. Our customers love us. Our friend Dixie said, I really was weary because of all the websites that are out there, but boy, was I surprised at the quality, timely response I received. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. That's a lot of exclamation points. And then she says, I'm like most people living paycheck to paycheck, but this was the best investment that I've ever had. Thank you. One more exclamation point. That's the basics on the debt validation letter. Now I'm going to go over some frequently asked questions about that debt validation letter. I'm just going to run through them. Should you use a debt validation letter? Personally, our take is that debt validation letter is an awesome strategic move in practically every situation where a collector is contacting a consumer about a debt and trying to collect on it. Practically every situation. As an example, before I did this video, actually like a couple years ago, I've been helping out people in the debt collection space for quite a while. I had a friend who was hounded for a cleaning fee by a past landlord. I was just coming after him for like a $300 bogus cleaning fee. He's like, hey man, there's a bunch of like popcorn on this couch, gotta pay $300 to get it cleaned out. You know how it is, you know how landlords are. He got hounded for this bogus debt, I told my friend, hey man, you gotta send the guy a debt validation letter. My friend listened, he was a very, very smart man. He sent the collector a debt validation letter. The collector then anteed up and sued my friend for the debt. You might think that's a bad thing, but actually, sometimes it's like a lot of the times it's actually a great move. It's actually a good thing that they're suing you. Because then my friend came over to solosuit.com and he used our answer document to respond to the lawsuit. And then debt collector was like, dang man, it's too expensive for me to collect on this bogus debt. So they just dropped the case, and then the collector just dismissed the case, and now he can't be sued for that debt again. Now the issue is resolved. Boom. So that's why a debt validation letter is powerful. Here's how the debt validation letter can play out in different scenarios. If you don't owe the debt, then the collector is likely to fold because they can't provide validation of the debt. If you only owe some of the debt, then the collector will be forced to prove the amount that you actually owe. This can remove thousands of fraudulent dollars added on top of the actual debt. If you owe the full debt, then the collector still might not be able to show proper documentation that you owe it, or they might not be able to show documentation that they own the debt and they have the right to collect on it. And finally, if the debt collector is actually able to validate the debt, then you still benefit by having additional information about the debt. The letter will put you in a better place to negotiate a settlement, and you can request the collector cease contacting you. So that's how the debt validation letter can be super powerful in a bunch of different situations. What if the debt collector doesn't validate the debt? If the debt collector doesn't validate the debt, then that's an FDCPA violation, and you sue him for $1,000. Boom. Also, if the debt collector didn't provide the 5 points within 5 days, another violation, sue him for another $1,000. And just while we're at it, another violation that commonly happens is if they contacted you after you sent the debt validation letter before providing validation. So if you say, hey, this debt is disputed, and then they contact you after that before they provide actual validation of the debt, it's another violation, another $1,000. I think you're figuring out how this goes. What if the debt collector validates the debt? All right, if the debt collector validates the debt, you have a few options still. All right, no, don't freak out. You still got a lot of good options.
I'm freaking out, man.
One, you can actually send a cease and desist letter. That leverages section 805 of the FDCPA, or you can actually say, hey, don't contact me unless you're gonna sue me. You can make a settlement offer. So you could say, hey, all right, you validated that I owe you $3,000. I don't have $3,000. I only got $1,000, and then you can make that offer just for $1,000. You could do nothing. Sometimes works, you know. Why worry? You know, don't worry, be happy. Yeah, when we just have $3K on hand, you can just pay the full amount off. What's the difference between a debt validation letter and a debt verification letter? All right, some real talk right now. There's some drama going on about what this document's actually called. If it's a debt validation letter, if it's a debt verification letter. A lot of bloggers online are saying that it's like a debt verification letter. But the truth is, I think people are just making it more complicated than it actually needs to be. Alright, our article about debt validation letter, it cites the FDCPA pretty at length, just like showing what the FDCPA actually has to say on the topic. And the FDCPA pretty much uses the words validation and verification interchangeably. And therefore the water's pretty muddy, right? But most people refer to this document as a debt validation letter, so that's what we decided to call it here at SoloSuit. What should I do after mailing the debt validation letter? Here's 2 important tips that you should do after. First, you should check your credit report, make sure that it's actually reported as being disputed. And then second, you should keep good records, alright? Don't trust the debt collectors, even if they are trustworthy, even if they're nice people, don't trust them. You gotta keep your own records, and that will be crucial for winning lawsuits or for resolving this matter down the road. What if I missed the 30-day deadline? Well, I got good news, right? You can still send the collector the letter. Maybe they don't know that the deadline passed. The FDCPA actually doesn't say what happens. It does suggest that the collector, well, it does say actually straight up that the collector will assume that the debt is valid if there's not a dispute, a debt validation letter sent within 30 days. Right? So if you don't send it, then the collector will just assume that the debt is valid. If you send the letter late, then maybe there's a little bit of a gray room there. There's a little bit of wiggle room. But really, if you don't send the letter at all, then the debt collector will assume the debt is valid and just keep on collecting on it, and they will hound you until they get that money. And once more, SoloSuit can take care of this for you. You can just go over to solosuit.com and generate your debt validation letter. We also help with other types of documents. Most people know that we help people respond to debt collection lawsuits, and and we help those people win those lawsuits. So you can use us to respond to a debt collection lawsuit. You can also use us to respond pre-lawsuit just to a regular debt collection letter. That's all I've got for you today, folks. As always, I am rooting for you.